After a national tragedy like the Bondi attack, you always see this explosion of questions. Who's to blame? What's the cause? How do we fix it? Well, one nation leader, Pauline Hanson, came out with a really powerful and, let's be honest, controversial response. So, in this breakdown, we're going to deconstruct exactly what she argued in a recent interview, just to understand her point of view.
She kicked things off with this question right here. It's a question that really tapped into that feeling of shock and sadness a lot of people were feeling. And it was the perfect setup for a much broader, much sharper critique of where she thinks the country is going wrong. Okay, so let's really get into it and unpack her argument. We're going to start with her main idea about immigration. Then we'll get into who she's blaming, and finally, we'll look at the story she's telling versus the government's. Right at the very center of everything Pauline Hanson is saying is this one big theme: immigration and what she calls assimilation. For her, this is ground zero for the whole problem. And there it is. This one sentence is pretty much the foundation for her whole position. She's not arguing against immigration as a concept, but she's being very specific. It's about bringing in people with ideologies she believes just don't fit with Australian culture. So she really draws a line in the sand here. She says multiculturalism isn't just about, enjoying different kinds of food or going to festivals. She kind of dismisses that as surface level stuff. For her, real assimilation goes way deeper. It's about getting on the same page with cultural beliefs, following the law, and truly, fully embracing Australia. And here's what that actually means to her. It's not just, ticking a box. It's a total buy-in to Australian culture and its values. In her view, it's a demand for people to not just live in Australia, but to become fundamentally part of Australia. It's about where your loyalty lies and making sure your lifestyle is compatible with the nation's. Okay, so after laying out what she sees as the problem, a failure of assimilation, Hanson then pivots to pointing fingers, and her aim is locked directly onto the country's current leadership.
Wow, she is not holding back at all. This is an incredibly direct and severe accusation. She's essentially putting the ultimate responsibility for what happened squarely on the Prime Minister, calling him out for what she sees as a complete failure to lead. And this isn't just some vague feeling she has. She points to a list of specific government actions, or inactions. She brings up allowing certain refugees in, the return of ISIS brides, and a failure to stop what she calls the spread of hatred from some clerics. She's basically building a case, brick by brick, that the government itself has created a divided and dangerous country. Now, while the government's first move was to talk about making gun laws tougher, Hanson came out with a totally different take. She thinks focusing on the weapons is completely missing the point. You can see here how the two arguments are just polar opposites. The official story is about the tool, the weapon, but Hanson wants to steer the entire conversation over to the motive, the ideology that drove the violence, and what she says were massive security failures that let it all happen. This quote really gets right to the heart of her argument. As far as she's concerned, talking about gun control is just a distraction. The real core issue, she insists, is the belief system that pushes someone to do something so violent. And to hammer her point home about a broken system, she asks this really pointed question. She's highlighting what looks like a huge contradiction, right? Why would a person who was reportedly being looked at for radicalization be in a house full of legal firearms? For Hanson, that's not a gun law problem. It's an intelligence and enforcement failure, plain and simple. So you add all this up, and what's the end result, according to Hanson? Well, her argument builds to this really bleak conclusion about where Australia stands on safety and how people are feeling. This is her take on the national mood. She's claiming that all these failures have just chipped away at that basic sense of security for everyday Australians. And in her opinion, that fear isn't just paranoia, it's a totally valid reaction to the situation. When you boil it all down, her entire critique funnels into this one message. She's saying what's needed isn't more talk, or what she calls weak, pathetic words, but a real decisive change in leadership and a complete rethink of who we let come into this country. And so that leaves us with this huge question, doesn't it? It's really the core of the whole debate. It makes you think about how a society can best keep itself safe. Is it by controlling the tools people use for violence, or is it by confronting the beliefs that make them want to use them in the first place?